While Jean continued to lie on the sandy bottom and stared at the creature in amazement, not knowing how to behave, he repeated with the same imperturbable look.
I said, get up.
Jean finally gathered her strength and said in an uncomprehending tone.
What?
The creature took a deep breath and said,
I've already told you twice, so there won't be a third time.
After these words, it serenely swam away from Jean and sat down on the bottom, assuming the lotus position and slowly closing its eyes.
I'll be waiting.
Jean, seeing such a gesture of goodwill, was puzzled, but decided to quickly take advantage of it. She tried to use the bioluminescent charge from her eyes to neutralize the monster while it wasn't looking. She aimed at his huge head and, having accumulated enough energy, tried to shoot, but all she managed were tiny, barely noticeable sparks that glinted slightly in her eyes. The monster, hearing the sounds of discharges without opening his eyes, said,
I don't advise you to waste your remaining strength on such posturing. You won't do anything to me, but you'll weaken yourself.
In despair and misunderstanding, Jean hysterically replied to him.
Do you know who my family is? Who are you anyway? What do you want from me?
The creature opened its eyes slightly and looked at her.
Calm down. Firstly, yes, I know who your family is. You told me about it yourself before the fight. Secondly, you will find out when the time comes. And thirdly, I want you to fight like a real warrior, with your hands and feet. Will that answer suit you?
Jean silently looked into his eyes and, realizing that she had no other choice, tried to get up. But she fell almost immediately, as her body did not obey her and hurt so much that Jean could barely breathe. The creature, seeing her plight, looked at her with a kind of spark of regret and said,
Calm down. Breathe deeply.
Jean said angrily.
Breathe deeper? And how will this help me? It even hurts to move my fingers.
Calm down. Your body hasn't recovered from the shock yet. You have to breathe deeply to fill your muscles with oxygen. So breathe and get up slowly. No sudden movements.
Jean reluctantly followed the monster's advice. She began to breathe deeply, passing hundreds of liters of water through her gills in one breath, and felt the pain gradually subside. And the body gradually regained its strength. At the same time, to her surprise, the interlocutor continued to sit in the lotus position opposite her and silently watched as his enemy gradually regained strength. Jean was genuinely surprised that the one who had beaten her to a pulp just a few minutes ago was now giving her advice and behaving not like a rival, but like some kind of master trying to teach his student brutal training. For a few moments, it reminded her of her mother, who used the same methods to teach first Agatha and then Jean. Suddenly, she thought of Agatha, who she thought was going to meet her. Jean decided that this unknown creature could be defeated if she and her sister joined forces against it. Therefore, Jean decided to stall for time until Agatha appeared, and also learn more about this mysterious creature.
I've never seen anyone like you before. Who are you and what is your name?
The creature answered her casually.
I have already answered this question.
I'm sorry, but I'd like to know more about who I'm fighting. Besides, I'm very curious about why you sank the ship.
The creature frowned and glared at her.
Shut up. Your chatter makes it harder for you to breathe.
Jean realized that her companion was not in the mood to talk, and silently continued to regain her strength, glancing from time to time in the direction of the gorge, from which Agatha was about to appear. After some more heavy breathing, she regained consciousness so much that her body began to glow again, and the pain almost disappeared. The creature shook its head in satisfaction and said,
Good. Now stand up, straighten up, and take a fighting stance.
Jean silently rose from the bottom, clenched her hands into fists, pressing them to her chest, and cast at him an evil look full of fire and rage. Although she still felt severe pain in her chest and head, she tried her best to keep her body in a horizontal position. The monster rose gracefully from the bottom and also assumed a fighting stance.
Attack, princess.
At that very moment, Jean used her disguise and, becoming invisible, left the place at full speed, heading down the gorge to meet Agatha. The monster was confused for a couple of seconds, but quickly took control of his emotions and rushed in pursuit of the Kraken. Fortunately for him, such a large creature is not able to move silently. Therefore, even being invisible, the Kraken cannot move silently. Therefore, even being invisible, the creature easily determined her approximate direction. Jean swam down the gorge with all her might, not even looking back, naively hoping that the monster had not noticed her. At the same time, he swam right up to her and grabbed one underwater geyser in each hand from the bottom at full speed. After that, he determined the approximate location of Jean by ear and threw one geyser at her with all his might. The geyser crashed into the back of Jean, who immediately dropped her disguise and also smeared it in a black substance. Jean slowed down slightly and turned back to see that the monster was gaining on her. Scared, Jean decided to use her strongest weapon. Gathering her strength, She aimed and shot at him, releasing a stream of orange energy from her eyes. The monster saw it and got his bearings in an instant. He threw a second geyser into the discharge, which he held in his left hand, which caused an explosion, in place of which there was a large black cloud. Jean, not seeing this, stopped and looked at the cloud, trying to see the remains of the defeated monster in it. But all she saw were two huge green eyes that burst out of the cloud at full speed right at her. It was so fast that Jean did not have time to react, as suddenly a monster's fist flew into her face, from which she instantly fell to the bottom, ceasing to glow. She could barely keep herself conscious. The creature swam up to her and placed its right foot on her stomach. Jean's face twisted in pain, but she was exhausted and couldn't do anything. The monster leaned close to her face, so she could see her reflection in his eyes, just like the first time. After that, the monster said with disappointment and anger,
Princess Jean, you have taken advantage of my trust.
Jean tried to answer him, but the blow made her tongue numb, and she couldn't say anything. Suddenly, the monster abruptly grabbed her face with his right hand. She resisted and hit him several times, but her strength was not enough to do anything. His hand began to tighten, which caused Jean terrible pain. She had already mentally said goodbye to her life. Memories of today began to scroll through her head. How she got up in the morning and met Agatha, how she listened to her story. Her conversation with her aunt in the trophy room and her fateful decision to go scouting with Agatha flashed through her mind. But at that moment, Jean felt something strange. She couldn't control these memories. They were coming in a continuous stream, disconnected from her perception. Moments later, she felt the monster's grip loosen. He released his grip, and Jean's head sank to the bottom. The creature closed its eyes and thought about something in silence for a while. After that, it serenely opened its eyes and said with interest,
So that's it. You've never been in a real fight before. That explains everything. But never mind. Very soon you will have plenty of opportunities to prove yourself.
He took his foot off Jean's stomach, which fell into a stupor from what he had heard. And despite the pain, she forced herself to say in a lisping voice,
What? How do you know that? What are you?
The monster narrowed his eyes angrily and looked at her.
I told you, you don't need to know that. Besides, I'm sure your sister will be here soon, so I can't waste time on long explanations. But don't worry, you'll find out soon enough. Over time.
Suddenly, the monster's eyes began to emit an incredibly bright light, becoming like a pair of giant searchlights. Jean did not understand what was happening, and in her powerlessness to do anything, she screamed at the top of her voice.
Agatha.
After that, the light became even brighter, illuminating everything with daylight. But after a moment, it faded out, plunging the gorge back into pitch darkness. The throne room, illuminated from all sides by bright light, was calm and peaceful, as always. Nothing could break it except Queen Sadia, who sat on the throne in proud solitude and enthusiastically examined the stone tablets, flat as sheets of paper, on which beautiful patterns were carefully scratched. She carefully examined each of them. At the same time, even though she was alone in the hall, she did not relax for a moment. She did not slouch, kept her back straight, barely bending her neck. Suddenly, Brill swam into the throne room, interrupting her peace.
Hi Mom, sorry to interrupt. Are you busy?
The queen raised her head and looked at her son.
Hello, Brill. Yes, I'm busy. I'm choosing a relief design for the royal chambers.
She took two engravings, which depicted relief drawings resembling a sea wave in the mouth of a whirlpool, and showed them to her son.
Look at this. I can't decide which is better, calm wave or wild whirlpool. They're both beautiful, but they don't fit together in any way.
Brill looked at the engravings in silence and with a stony face and said,
Yes, it is very interesting. But I'm here too.
He didn't have time to finish his sentence, as Sadia interrupted him.
You weren't listening to me, were you?
Disappointment could be seen in her penetrating gaze. Brill was a little nervous, but he quickly pulled himself together.
Well, I don't understand it. Besides, that's not why I came here.
The queen placed the engravings on her lap and intertwined her fingers.
Really? And what brings you here?
Lucy.
Sadia looked at Brill questioningly and asked.
Lucy? What's wrong with her?
Brill was confused by his mother's words and said indignantly,
Well, you didn't seem to be listening to what we were talking about last night.
Sadia was slightly surprised by Brill's casual response, as it was unlike him.
Hey, I was tired. Or do you think I should forget about all royal matters and listen to your endless stories about your girlfriend?
Brill realized that his answer might have been too harsh. So he guiltily looked away from his mother to defuse the situation and said,
Okay, I'm sorry. But anyway, I'll remind you that today is Lucy's birthday.
Cydia breathed a sigh of relief and leaned against the back of the throne.
Well, then give her my best wishes.
Thanks, Mom. I'm sure she'll like it.
Cydia picked up the engravings again and began to examine them. But Brill did not leave the throne room and continued to stand in front of her, as if he wanted to tell her something. Cydia noticed this and, without taking her eyes off the tablets, asked.
Anything else?
Brill said with a slight hesitation.
Yes, you're right. Lucy is hosting a party at her house and invited me there. May I?
No.
Cydia coldly interrupted her, taking her eyes off the tablets and looking at Brill, who began to plead with her.
Mom, please let me go to the party.
No.
The queen was still cool-headed, but Brill was very persistent. He clung to her hand and begged with triple his strength.
Please, 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 please.
In response, Cydia gently pushed him away and said in the same stern tone.
No.
But yesterday you said you'd think about it.
Cydia asked in surprise.
Really? Is that what I said?
Brill shook his head approvingly. Cydia rolled her eyes and said.
Last night, when you told me that, I was exhausted and could agree that the earth is flat.
Brill became desperate and decided that she had left him no choice. He made the most pitiful expression on his face and looked at his mother. Cydia, looking into his huge pupils, almost fell for this trick, but at the last moment she looked away and said in a matter-of-fact tone.
Don't even try, Brill. This trick worked when you were 10.
His usual expression returned to him, and he stared at the floor in disappointment. Cydia straightened up again and said.
Don't be offended by me. I would have let you go. But you and I remember the last time you were at your friend's party. Wasn't his name Chuck?
Brill looked up from the floor and asked.
Actually, Doug.
Are you sure? For some reason, I thought it was Chuck's birthday.
No, Chuck's birthday was a month before that.
Cydia thought for a few moments, trying to remember which one of them she was talking about. In the end, she was able to remember.
Oh, right, I finally remembered, it was Doug, he's skinny. Chuck is fat.
Brill crossed his arms over his chest and said with slight indignation.
Hey, Mom, don't say that. Yes, Chuck has problems with being overweight, but I wouldn't call him fat.
Cydia brushed off his words.
It doesn't matter. You remember what you were doing at that party.
Brill began to recall those events with a thoughtful look. But it didn't take long, because it's impossible to forget something like that. But Brill pretended he didn't remember anything.
To be honest, no. It's been a year now.
The queen said angrily.
Oh, so you forgot. Well, I'll remind you how you and your idiot friends ate too much fermented seaweed and caused a real rebellion in the kingdom.
Come on, Mom, the rebellion is different.
You're right.
Cydia said.
The rebellion has a purpose. You have created a real anarchy.
Brill tried to jokingly dismiss her words.
Mom, you're in your repertoire. You're exaggerating, as always.
Cydia did not appreciate her son's sarcasm and said in all seriousness.
Exaggerating? Am I exaggerating? You and your friends disrupted the funeral and stole the coffin, and then threw it into the school building.
Brill decided to justify himself.
Well, actually, there was a cake in that coffin. It wasn't a funeral, it was the birthday of some 100-year-old man, whom his relatives wanted to congratulate in such a strange way.
And then you broke into the royal dining room and took out 150 kilograms of biscuits. After that, it began to be scattered throughout the kingdom.
This, by the way, raised the authority of the monarchy in the eyes of the common people.
The queen got even angrier. The throne room trembled, and the lights flickered randomly.
Well, how do you think it raised the authority of the monarchy that you entered the royal prison and started opening the cells, along with distributing the remaining biscuits to the prisoners?
Brill felt ashamed of this reminder, and realizing that it was impossible to justify himself, he said.
Yes, I admit we overdid it here. But we didn't do it on purpose. We were drunk, and besides, they couldn't do anything, as they were quickly caught and brought back.
Suddenly, the throne room shook from a powerful electromagnetic pulse caused by the queen's anger. This impulse affected the entire kingdom and burst beyond its borders in the form of a powerful release of energy. Brill covered his head with his hands in fright. And when everything calmed down, he carefully removed his hands and looked at his mother, who was looking at him with a very, very angry expression on her face. Brill realized that he needed to choose his words more carefully.
You're right, Mom. There is no excuse for my behavior. I was being stupid and thoughtless. I shouldn't have eaten so much fermented algae, but I did, and it had bad consequences.
Cydia said.
And that's putting it mildly.
But I've changed over the last year. I don't eat fermented seaweed anymore and I don't go to parties.
Because I forbade you.
Brill smiled a little sheepishly and said,
Yes, that's right, and I am eternally grateful to you for that. You've put me on the right path. And I declare with confidence that I will not take a single step away from him.
From these words, Cydia felt a strong warmth in her heart and even almost smiled. But Brill continued the sentence.
But it's my girlfriend's birthday, and I already promised that I would come. Not going to her party is like slapping her in the face. That's why I'm asking you to let me go. Besides, there won't be any fermented algae. It will be the most ordinary and unremarkable festive evening.
Cydia looked at him thoughtfully. Brill decided that he had succeeded in convincing his mother. Well, at least that's what he wanted to believe, because he knew her too well not to find Cydia's next words somewhat surprising.
I'm sorry, son, but no. Believe it or not, my decision is for your own good. And when you get older, you'll realize that I was right.
Cydia picked up the engravings again and said in a businesslike tone.
Now go. I still have a lot to do.
Brill took a deep breath and left the throne room with sadness and disappointment. Although he was silent, he asked himself a question in his mind.
Well, why did I come here? I knew she wouldn't let me go, didn't I?
He felt drained and decided to go to the dining room to dispel his grief. And it was just in time, because at that very moment, large colorful plates with a variety of dishes appeared on the table, from sea cucumber cookies to anemone jam. Julia sat at the table and looked sadly at all these dishes. But she was sad not because her favorite coral crackers were not on the table, but because she had been waiting for several hours for Jean and Agatha, who, as she thought, had gone exploring and still had not returned. Out of boredom, she moved the plates around the table, trying to keep herself occupied. But when Brill entered the dining room, she immediately perked up.
Hi, Brill.
When Brill saw his aunt, he also cheered up a little and waved at her.
Hello, Auntie. Are you having dinner?
Julia looked at the table full of dishes, and then looked back at her nephew.
Not yet.
I see.
Brill floated up to the table.
Are you waiting for someone?
Yes, I am waiting for the return of Jean and Agatha.
Brill said.
Return. Have they gone somewhere?
Julia sighed wearily and said,
Yes, they sailed away to explore the territory.
Okay, and when did they leave?
Julia smiled slightly, imagining her nephew's reaction when he heard the answer.
It's been hours.
Brill's eyes nearly popped out of his head at those words. Even Julia was a little surprised by this level of compression. Brill shifted his gaze to the table, and then looked back at his aunt and said,
And you're still waiting for them?
Julia was very surprised by this question, as she did not expect to hear something like this from him.
Well, yes. What was I supposed to do? Eat your lunch and go about your business? As far as I'm concerned, that would be disrespectful to them.
At these words, Brill wilted, and Julia began to suspect that something was wrong with him. She immediately remembered how the entire dining room had been shaken by a powerful electromagnetic pulse caused by her sister's rage a couple of minutes ago, and she decided that it had something to do with Brill's behavior. Julia decided to find out what it was.
Brill, is something wrong with you?
Brill looked sharply at his aunt and nervously said,
No, it's okay.
Julia was finally convinced that something had happened to Brill, because she knew that when they say that everything is okay, it usually means that everything is not okay.
Brill, I'm sorry, but you don't know how to lie. I can see right through you, like a transparent jellyfish.
After these words, Brill decided to leave the dining room in a hurry.
Okay, I'm leaving. I have a lot of things to do, so I won't bother you.
But before he could swim to the exit, Julia called out to him.
Wait, Brill, please, don't go.
Brill stopped and looked back at his aunt. She looked at him with pity and said,
Listen, I've been waiting for the girls for hours. Harold is in the kitchen, and he doesn't have time for me. I'm really bored here. Please talk to me. If something has happened to you, I will listen to you and, if anything, I will give you advice. It'll be easier for you, but it's nice for me.
Brill looked at Julia for a while and finally decided to tell her what had happened. He swam over to her and sat on the edge of the table. Julia motioned for him to take the food from her plate, which he did, tearing off a piece of cookie. Chewing on a piece of cookie, he said,
Where should I start?
Julia smiled slightly and replied.
Start from the beginning.
Brill swallowed a piece and said,
Okay.
More than an hour had passed since Jean's departure, and Agatha began to feel terribly anxious. All she could think about was that something bad might have happened to her little sister. Agatha didn't want to imagine what it was, but her imagination conjured up terrible images in her head that were terrifying to think about. In the end, Agatha decided that she had had enough, and it was time to go in search of Jean. She swam into the gorge and began to move quickly but cautiously into its depths, carefully peering and listening to her surroundings, hoping to meet her sister any minute. Agatha no longer thought about fulfilling the plan, as all she wanted was to see Jean safe and sound. But the further she swam, the more fear and anxiety overcame her. Agatha began to regret that she could even come up with such a stupid and dangerous idea. But she didn't have time to develop this thought, because ahead of the absolute darkness she saw a strange silhouette, different from the rest of the surroundings. And the closer she swam to it, the more she realized that it was not some kind of stone or a strangely shaped stalagmite, but a living being. Agatha slowed and began to approach him cautiously until the bright pink glow from her body illuminated him. Agatha saw a strange humanoid creature with black skin, long arms and legs, and a huge head. This creature was sitting with its eyes closed in the lotus position. Agatha was very surprised, as it did not look like any creature she had fought or read about in the royal library. She stood up in an upright position and began to examine him more closely. But suddenly, the creature opened its huge green eyes, occupying half of its face, and began to stare at her. Agatha was surprised by the size of his eyes and began to stare into them without looking away or blinking. She reflexively assumed a defensive stance, preparing to attack at any moment. Because that's what all the monsters before him usually did.
Hello, Princess Agatha. It is a great honor for me to meet you.
At first, Agatha did not realize that it was this creature that was talking to her. Because there are many intelligent races in the sea, but she had never seen anything like it. And yet, realizing that she was facing a rational being, Agatha decided that it was not worth escalating the situation. She lowered her arms, straightened up, and spoke in a diplomatic tone.
Hello? To be honest, I was expecting to meet someone else.
The creature grinned slightly and said,
Things don't always go as originally planned. In such cases, it is important to keep yourself in control so as not to forget about your main goal, Princess.
These words reminded Agatha of Jean, and she decided to ask the unknown creature if it had seen her. But Agatha stopped in time, as she did not know who was in front of her and whether she could trust him. So she decided to find out more about him.
Well, you know my name. From where?
Your reputation is getting ahead of you. You are known to all residents of the Pacific Ocean.
Agatha mentally determined that the creature speaking to her was from the Pacific Ocean. Now she decided to find out who he was.
You're right, I'm surprised at my own fame. Even among those I've never heard of, I'm recognized for some reason. But you know, it's nice not only to be known, but also to know who I'm talking to, if you know what I mean.
The creature shook its head slightly in approval.
Oh yes, of course.
It stood up from the bottom on its long legs, and Agatha was able to fully appreciate its size. Although he was almost as tall as she was, his lean build spoke to her about his physical weakness. The creature clasped his hands and bowed low to her.
Sorry for not introducing myself right away. My name is Kiyosashi.
Agatha couldn't remember such a difficult to pronounce name the first time, but she decided it wouldn't be polite to ask again. After all, the hours spent at the royal balls made themselves felt. So she decided to continue the conversation, carefully avoiding his name.
I am very pleased to meet you. Now, would you mind if I asked you what race you belong to, and for what purpose are you here?
The creature bowed low to Agatha again and replied with maximum respect.
No, of course I don't mind. But if your highness allows me, in order to save my time and yours, I will skip the first question and immediately answer the second one.
Kiyosashi's refusal to answer the first question made Agatha suspicious of his intentions. But she didn't show it, and with the same formal tone, she said,
No, I don't mind.
Thank you very much.
Kiyosashi bowed once more.
I have come a very long way to meet you.
Agatha looked at Kiyosashi questioningly.
With me? For what?
You see, you have something that I really need, and I wanted to meet and talk to you to try to get that. I have been waiting for you for a long time, and when I had already lost hope, I suddenly met your sister Jean.
Agatha, who sensed the understatement in his words, decided that she wanted to know the details here. She interrupted the other man and said worriedly,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Have you met Jean?
Yes, I met her. And to be honest, she made a pretty bad impression on me.
Agatha said in an uncomprehending tone.
Bad impression? In what sense?
Kiyosashi folded his hands behind his back and replied in a calm tone.
I'll say this, her behavior was very disrespectful.
Agatha was genuinely amazed by what she heard. Since she had known Jean all her life, she couldn't even imagine her behaving disrespectfully. For Agatha, it was the equivalent of comparing land and water.
Disrespectful? I'm sorry, but could you tell me more about this?
Kiyosashi straightened up and said,
Of course, she accused me of destroying the ship without proof, threatened to rip off my arm, and the worst part was that she took advantage of my trust to cowardly escape from the battlefield.
Agatha was deeply shocked by Kiyosashi's last words, which implied that he was fighting with her sister. Agatha finally realized that this creature, whoever it was a threat. Agatha felt herself overwhelmed with worry, which turned smoothly into rage. She clenched her hands into fists and resumed her fighting stance.
What did you do to her?
Kiyosashi looked at her carefully and replied in a calm tone.
Calm down, she's fine.
Agatha replied with even more fury.
Where is she?
The creature crossed his arms over his chest and said,
She's in a safe place, princess.
Take me to her.
Of course, but first, I would like you to listen to my suggestion.
Agatha's face twisted with anger. She was outraged that some monster refused to follow her orders and instead wanted to discuss his pathetic case, which Agatha did not care about. From overflowing anger, she began to gnash her teeth, her voice changed, and her heartbeat increased.
Listen up, Kozushi, or whatever your name is. Here's my suggestion, or you tell me right now where Jean is. Or you'll tell me where she is anyway, but you'll be choking on your blood.
For a moment, Agatha herself couldn't believe that those were exactly her words. She has never threatened to kill an opponent, but now, everything is completely different. Agatha was ready to carry out this threat in all seriousness. Kiyosashi looked at her with disappointment. Agatha didn't know if it was because she had refused the deal, or because she had mispronounced his name. But it didn't matter.
Okay, if you want to fight, then I will give you the opportunity.
Kiyosashi swam closer and assumed a fighting stance.
If you win, I will tell you where your sister is. But if I win, then you will listen to my proposal. Do you agree, princess?
I agree.
Agatha answered almost without thinking, as she had no doubt that she could win. All her thoughts were busy thinking of a strategy. For the first time in her life, she wanted to fight, and she wanted to prolong this fight as long as possible so that she could enjoy every blow she delivered to his huge head. But Agatha did not forget that she would have to fight a creature that she had never fought before. Besides, with a sentient being, which didn't simplify the situation. Therefore, she decided that she would first give him the opportunity to attack to test his strength. And then, she will launch a counterattack, slowly blocking his escape routes, using their surroundings in the form of gorge walls and numerous underwater geysers. To then deliver a series of crushing blows to him and win the fight. The opponents stood and silently looked into each other's eyes. A deathly silence hung around them, ending as quickly as it had begun. The two titans attacked each other at the same time, starting a fight.